Your senator from Eden Prairie authored a bill which would eliminate Meals on Wheels.
Yes, isn't that fine? Obviously, these folks do not have parents or grandparents.
Tim O'Brien and Nancy Nelson comment on all those really bad Republican bills from the regular session.
But I am willing to bet that a lot of the very people who are trying to cut those programs are sitting in the front row at church every Sunday.
Democratic Visions is handmade by volunteers for the entire metro region by DFL Senate District 42. Enough has already been said about the end of the state shutdown and future deficits. Had Governor Mark Dayton been a pushover, Minnesota would have been sold off to Republican ideologues, the rich, the gun lobby, and, as Richard Pryor would say, whitey. Tim O'Brien and AM 950 Radio's Nancy Nelson have taken measure of those non-budget bills that were truly divisive and offensive.
Let's go beyond their misconceived economic policy and focus in on some of the other bills, not all of them passed, but they were authored by the Republicans. I want to start with one that was co-authored by Representative Keith Downey from my House district, which was to eliminate pay equity for women in the public sector. That, I think, is one of the worst instances of political grandstanding that I've ever seen.
And of course, the reason they said that we didn't need it is because something already exists and it's no longer a problem. Well, they're simply not paying attention. In the state of Minnesota today, the woman in the workplace in roughly the same position as her male counterpart makes 75 cents to his dollar today, right now. And for them,
even with pay equity legislation in place.
Even with pay equity legislation in place, because when grievances have been brought under Pawlenty, the whole process moved so slowly and in many instances completely ignored. How a woman who works outside of her home in the state of Minnesota on that one issue alone could vote for a Republican who wants to slap her in the face. And do you know how many of the women in Minnesota who are fighting that sort of pay equity situation are the sole support of their family? They're supporting their children all by themselves. And these people think that that's acceptable? How dare they?
The second bill is the one that thankfully didn't pass, but nevertheless it was introduced and it was discussed, which would allow citizens to kill someone who ventured onto their property. So shoot first and ask questions later, I guess.
Supposedly the far-right Republicans, and we now have a radical right, I mean, they've just taken us off the cliff. They are the law and order. We care about law and order. So if you care and you call into your committees the police commissioners and the state patrol people and all of the law enforcement people from all over the state, and every one of them without exception says, for goodness sakes, don't do this.
Well, Senator Harrington, the former chief of police in St. Paul, took an adamant stance against this bill.
And the law and order Republicans said, oh, that's really nice, police officers. We care that you go out and put your life on the line every single day. But when you come here to tell us we're making an enormous mistake because you know you're out there, we're going to ignore you because we love guns so much. And I'm sorry, that's what it is. These folks get a lot of money for their campaigns from the National Rifle Association, and they're just pandering to them. And to think that a police officer could, when he gets a domestic call, you know, a woman calls and she's being abused, hit the door, and the man inside who is beating her to a pulp would be allowed to turn around and shoot that officer and blow him away and be protected by a law that says, oh, I thought he was invading my home and I had to protect myself.
Here's number 3 on Tim's list.
Your senator from Eden Prairie authored a bill which would eliminate Meals on Wheels.
Yes, isn't that fine? Obviously, these folks do not have parents or grandparents. And if they do, shame on them. Shame on them. When these Republicans want to make these sort of devastating cuts that cause human beings to suffer, I don't want them to be able to do it until they walk up to the door of a senior citizen who eats once a day and looks them in the face and says, I decided I'm not going to fund this, so you're not going to get this meal anymore. When they want to take health care away from a woman who's trying to take care of her children, I want them to walk up and look at that woman holding that child with a fever and saying, I don't want you to be able to take that kid to a doctor. How dare they? This is humanity. This is immoral. It is indecent. It is reprehensible.
And you have not only the proposed elimination of Meals on Wheels, but in the present bill that was passed and thankfully vetoed by Governor Dayton,
yes,
they were going to eliminate health insurance coverage for 140,000 disadvantaged
yes,
people.
Exactly. People living below the poverty line, a significant number of them greatly disabled, and they were willing to say to 140,000 people, you can't go to the doctor. But by the way, corporation over there, you're part of the $200 million tax break. I am willing to bet that a lot of the very people who are trying to cut those programs are sitting in the front row at church every Sunday.
Number 5.
We know that people are dying every day from smoking. For the life of me, I can't imagine what would motivate someone to attempt to repeal the smoking ban.
Almost everything they've done is beyond explanation. Everything makes you go, what? But of course, it's an interesting plan. Repeal the smoking ban so more people get cancer, and by the way, see to it they can't get health insurance. What a program.
Number 6.
We had the concealed carry bill passed several sessions ago.
I know it's
now there's a bill proposed to eliminate state-mandated background checks for gun purchases.
Precisely. And once again, they called in all of the police and all of the law enforcement people who said, for heaven's sakes, don't do this. And they said, oh, well, there's already a federal law in place, so we don't need our checks. And guess what? The federal law is full of holes, and all of those holes bypass every one of the checks the state of Minnesota has. For instance, if the man who killed 6 people in that Arizona parking lot and nearly killed Representative Gabby Giffords had come to Minnesota and the Republicans had their way and pulled a lot of these checks, he would have been able to get that rifle or that gun right here in Minnesota. But with our checks, he wouldn't be able to. And they did this right after that horrific shooting. What can be the motivation for people to say it should be easier for people who want to kill people to get a gun?
Number 7.
One of the bills introduced by the Republicans was for the state to print its own money.
I know. Okay.
So let's just leave it at that.
Who does these things?
But I want to touch upon 3 other bills.
Yes.
First of all, we have the anti-gay same-sex marriage constitutional amendment. That's been widely decried by the press as mean-spirited and malicious.
Our Minnesota legislature, led by the Republicans, was willing to say at a minimum, we know, of 500,000 people in the state of Minnesota, you're a second-class citizen. You do not have the rights that everybody else has. And we learn nothing from our history. The fact that they are not humiliated by this, it was within my lifetime and yours that the southern belt of states had laws that you could go to jail if you were black and I was white and we wanted to marry or have a relationship. Obviously that went by the wayside, and now we look at that and say how shameful. And in 2011, we have done that in the legislature. Our great hope is that right after they did this horrible thing to our brothers and sisters, the Minnesota public was polled, and 68% of them said they wanted nothing to do with it, and they were upset that it was going to be on the amendment bill.
In other words, it's going to boomerang against them with a vengeance.
Oh, please, please, please.
Number 9.
Voter ID.
Yeah.
In other words, disenfranchised voters.
Precisely.
A form of poll tax, which I believe is, from what I've read, is part of a national Republican strategy to thin down the voting pool by eliminating the ability of students, the elderly, and certain minorities to be able to vote, which is anathema to the concept of having a populace who can vote as a matter of right, not of privilege, as Representative Zeller would indicate.
We know that if every Democrat in this state or in the United States actually voted in elections, the Republicans would never get elected to anything, and they know that. And so the creation of this voter ID very specifically disenfranchises people who are less capable, who are less certain, who are more easily intimidated. Do you know that in the last election, they had billboards in North Minneapolis? Now, who do you think they were trying to affect in North Minneapolis?
Affect or intimidate.
Exactly. The billboards talked about, do not go to the polls and misrepresent yourself, because if you do, you'll go to jail. They put these billboards up in North Minneapolis. They didn't put them up in Eden Prairie, didn't put them up in Edina. It's because they wanted the elderly, and particularly people of color who would have gone to the polls and voted Democrat, to be afraid to go. So you say to a disenfranchised group of people, you got to go get a picture, and they're going to really check it. A lot of them are going to say, what'll happen to me if I say something wrong? Will they hurt me? Will they? Oh, I just won't go. Our democracy is built on the freedom to vote. And the Republicans actually want power so much, they are willing to take away that fundamental freedom.
Number 10.
Finally, of course, we have the bill introduced by the Republicans that would exempt Minnesota from participation in the National Health Care Act.
Let's remember that there were matching funds from the federal government. They wanted to send in for a pre-step to the health care reform. They wanted to send in $1.4 billion to the state of Minnesota. Governor Pawlenty said, absolutely not. My state and me, we don't have anything to do with health care reform. He threw 90,000 people off of the health care rolls instantly with that.
That's not all, folks. Here's Nancy's list of bad GOP bills.
Now, these are the things they did instead of balancing the budget. And remember,
exactly.
Remember jobs, jobs, jobs?
Mm-hmm. Laser focus on the economy.
Jobs, jobs, jobs. They did not create one single job in the state of Minnesota. They proposed legislation that would have eliminated somewhere between 30 and 50,000 jobs in the state of Minnesota. But then they will...
Vetoed by Governor Deaton.
Hello. But then they will say, oh, no, no, no. We had a jobs bill that came out of committee. Really? You forgot to fund it. So if there's no money to fund it. Okay, so instead of doing all of those things, they discussed a bike tax. They wanted to eliminate completely 8 state agencies, including the Departments of Employment and Economic Development, Health and Human Services, Labor and Industry, Revenue, MnDOT, and the Veterans Affairs.
What do they have, a dartboard and they're just throwing darts against the wall?
The Veterans Affairs. We have people coming back from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tours of duty. This party that cares so much about the military wanted in Minnesota to eliminate the Department of Veterans Affairs. They wanted to drug test welfare recipients. They wanted to pass a law that said if a welfare recipient was stopped by a police officer and had more than $20 in their pocket, they would be sent to jail. They wanted to prevent animal welfare advocates and activists from filming animal cruelty, because it should go on. We shouldn't know about it.
Out of sight, out of mind. Is that the theory?
Yeah, well, not for a lot of us who are activists, but
exactly.
Really, you don't want people to see that you're advocating cruelty to a living creature by trying to hide it.
A little censorship never hurt anybody, did it?
Tim, I want to cry. I have believed so much in human beings, at the end of the day, no matter what, caring about each other. And there is nothing that the Republicans gave us in this legislative session to tell us that they care about anything except money. That's devastating.
Do you ever try and get one of these new legislators on your radio program?
Well, not a lot of response.
Not a lot of response.
Although I do have a lot of Republicans who call in and say, I listen because I like to know what's going on, and then they'll call and say, I listen because I really like to abuse myself terribly, and my head's going to explode every time I listen to you. I get a lot of those calls.
Democratic Visions is handmade by volunteers for DFL Senate District 42, Lori Pryor, Chair. Democratic Visions can also be seen on YouTube and at dflsd42.org.